you ever wondered what happened to the family of Jesus? According to the gospel books, he has at least four brothers that are named. Although I suppose some people will call them cousins or relatives, but it looks like they are brothers. Whatever happened to them? And sometimes you ask that question as if we don't have any information. But in fact, it looks like two of the books in the New Testament were written by the brothers of Jesus, namely James and Jude. In fact, it's pretty clear that this James was a significant figure in the early church. If you look at the story in Acts 15, where there's this Jerusalem council that happens, James, not the apostle who had died earlier in the book of Acts, but James, the brother of Jesus, is viewed as the head or leader of the Acts council. So the family of Jesus seems to play a really important role in the early church. Not only did James and Jude write two letters that were included in the New Testament, but James himself, the brother of Jesus, also seems to be the head of, we might say, the Jerusalem church. Let me put a few verses on the screen so you can see what I'm talking about. So here you can see Jacob, Matthew 13. It talks about him being the son, and his brothers are James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas. Judas is Jude. It's the same name, just, I guess, in English, different spelling for whatever reason. You see in Acts 15, when everyone comes together, they listen to testimony from Paul and Peter, if memory serves. And James, after all the apostles stop speaking, James comes up and says, "Brothers, listen to me," quotes the Bible, does some work, and then says, "Therefore my judgment is," and based on his judgment, that's what the church does. Seems like James is the named leader of whatever that early group is. And if you look at his letter, it just says James, a servant of God and the Lord Jesus Christ. Well, it's interesting there that everyone would have known who he was. He didn't have to say James, but not that James, or this James, or the James from X and Y, but he's just James. He is the obvious known servant of God and Jesus Christ. He is almost without any need of further identification. And almost certainly, given his stature as Acts articulates it, he would have been the key early Christian leader in that city. He wasn't an apostle, but he was a key leader. Jude, he has to do a little bit of work. When he opens his epistle, he's said to be Jude, a servant of Jesus Christ and a brother of James. So he has to identify himself as James's brother so they know, oh, this is the Jude that this is. He is the brother of the head of the Jerusalem church. And I didn't put it in this block of text here, but you do remember that in the letter to the Galatians, Paul identifies three pillars of the church, Peter, John, and James. So Paul also confirms what Acts 15 shows by narrative, namely that those are the three key pillars in the early church. Probably Paul could have added himself, or eventually could have added himself as a key pillar, but at this time, very early on, in this sort of Jewish Christian setting, the brothers of Jesus, in particular Jude and James, would have been and were key figures. Beyond that, what about their other brothers? I don't really know exactly. I would say that the family of Jesus probably was held in high regard. It would make perfect sense. There's one other interesting thing I just wrote down in this verse list. I'm sure there's much more I could look at. But at the cross, Mary is there, the mother of Jesus, and Jesus looks at her and sees that she is next to the disciple whom he loves. It's John. And he says, "Woman, behold your son," referring to John. And then he says to the disciple, the beloved disciple, "Behold your mother." And while John here is not a biological brother like from Mary, He becomes, at this moment, the first informally adopted brother of Jesus, because both Mary and John become part of a new family. Now, that's an important fact, I'm sure, that happened because Mary's mother needed Jesus' mother, I'm sure, needed protection and all that kind of stuff. At the same time, John's the only gospel to record this, and one of the themes in John's gospel is sort of becoming a child of God. I'm just going to go on a limb here and say John includes this information not only because it's historically accurate, but also because it symbolizes this new family of God, namely this family through adoption by grace. And there's a real sense in which the church is about to birth would become his brothers. In fact, that's what Hebrews 2 says. Jesus is not ashamed to call us brothers, and we're, of course, saved by adoption into the family of God. And if you really wanted to press the analogy, which some traditions like to do, you could even say that there's a sense in which Mary is our adopted mother. I don't know if I would go that far, but it's at least an interesting passage in the Gospel according to John. That's a really simple video. I'll probably record more on the family of Jesus as I think through it more deeply over the next few months. But I thought it'd be an interesting video to ask the question, whatever happened to the family of Jesus? And now you know at least what happened to Mary. She was, I guess, informally now part of John's family, or maybe vice versa. You know that at least two of Jesus' brothers were key religious leaders in the early Christian movement, and they wrote letters or epistles, namely the Epistle of James and Jude, which were likely written very early in the church's history. With that, thanks for watching, and if you'd like to subscribe, I would appreciate it. Thank you.